Today we're talking about two of my favorite things, cartoons and scary stuff. Specifically cartoons that scared us when we were children. So let's just jump right in. I'm James and these are the top 10 dark kids cartoons guaranteed to give you nightmares. And we're kicking off this list with Angela Anaconda. This was a Canadian series that ran from 1999 to 2002. Now it's one of those cartoons that was always on. I definitely have memories of watching it, but I never actively tried, seeking it out or anything. There was something that just felt off about it for me as a kid. But back then, what was on was what was on, so you could either watch this or the news or something. It's one of those shows I look back on as I got older though and was like, yeah, this is an unsettling show. I don't remember a single episode, but I mean, just look at it. I actually think it looks really unique and interesting now, but I could see why I found it a little off-putting as a kid. The characters' faces are all taken from real life black and white photographs that are slightly distorted. Kids all look really weird, and you have computer animated backgrounds in color. It's just such a weird clash. It really makes the show feel nightmarish on a pure visual level. A real uncanny valley vibe to the whole thing. Number 9, Alice in Wonderland, and I'm talking about the 1951 Disney animated film here. The 2010 Tim Burton movie gave me nightmares for a whole other reason, in that it sucks. But the classic animated movie, I watched it so many times as a kid, I wore out the tape, and it's still one of my favorite movies till this day. But as much as I love this movie, it still creeped me out as a little kid, which it really goes to show how much we enjoyed getting scared, even as kids. Alice in Wonderland's story is of course steeped in surrealism, and surprisingly, the Disney movie really does embrace the absurdity of the story, making for one of the funniest Disney cartoons ever made, in my opinion. But it also has this really unsettling underbelly to it as well. And I think that mostly comes down to the fact that Alice is this little girl lost in this weird, mysterious place, unable to get home, and with nobody she can really trust. There are a lot of characters who she comes across that are silly, but they also have this dark side to them. They'll often turn on her and get angry out of nowhere, which I feel like is something kids kind of fear a lot. When adults just suddenly are yelling at them for doing something that they just don't understand. So there's a bit of that association there. And even the characters that don't really mean her harm are still completely out of their minds and unable to really be reasoned with. It's like you're talking to someone in a dream. It's the idea of being trapped in this weird place with no level-headed adult to help you that I think really is unsettling for a lot of kids. Number 8, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. I love this movie. I think it's one of the best Scooby-Doo pieces of media ever made, which isn't really a super high bar to reach, let's be honest, but this movie far surpasses that bar. This 1998 movie is the first of the direct-to-video, or I guess now direct-to-internet movies in the series. It takes place in New Orleans, and it's all in the title. The team finds themselves on an island full of zombies. Only this time, the monster isn't just that guy they met at the beginning in an overly complex costume. These turn out to be real zombies, and they look about as freaky as zombies in a kids movie can look without going completely overboard. They just hit that right level of spooky factor. They're all emaciated and decayed looking, they got glowing eyes, and the detailed art, this fantastic animation just really makes it all work. I love the art and animation here. It's hand-drawn, it has that real gritty 90s texture to it that I just love to look at, so fantastic stuff. Next up, we have the Ren and Stimpy episode, Ren's Toothache. I could have put a number of different Ren and Stimpy episodes on this list because this show was seriously messed up, hilarious, gross, and definitely creepy at times. In this episode, we see Stimpy proudly brushing his teeth. Ren refuses to brush his before proudly displaying his set of horrendously rotted teeth. That night, he starts grinding his teeth in his sleep and wakes up with a pile of crumpled up teeth in his bed before going to the bathroom and opening his mouth to discover that all his teeth are gone. But this is Ren and Stimpy, so that doesn't end there. That wouldn't be disturbing enough. So we see that Ren's gums just have these nerves sticking out of them. It's just really gross. My mouth just hurts talking about this episode. It's so gnarly. I guess it falls in that gross category a bit too, but I've had nightmares about all my teeth falling out, which I think represents the fear of aging. So I don't know, maybe this one freaks me out on that level. As a kid though, this just looked really painful, and yeah, you better believe I was brushing my teeth extra long after seeing this. The Halloween Tree. This movie is still a staple for me every Halloween. I'm actually getting excited for Halloween just thinking about watching this movie again. But as a kid, it definitely unsettled me a bit too. It's pretty dark for a kid's movie. If you've never seen it, it's about a group of kids meeting up to go trick-or-treating on Halloween, but their friend Pip doesn't show up, so they head to his house only to see him being loaded into an ambulance. But then they see his ghostly kind of figure of Pip silently running through the forest, and they follow him into this big dark mansion where they meet a ghoulish looking man named Carapace Clavicle Moundshroud, who's after Pip's soul and ends up taking the kids on a journey across the globe where they learn about all the origins of Halloween and the celebrations similar to it in different cultures across the world. I always found the opening of this movie so oddly eerie though, with the kids chasing the ghost of their dead friend through the forest and the way he makes no sound at all as his translucent figure runs through the trees. The ending is also pretty dark as the kids have to give up the last year of their lives in exchange for Pip's life to be returned. Number 5, The Black Cauldron. This is one of those animated Disney movies that I often forget is a Disney movie. For one thing, it's not talked about a whole lot because it wasn't very successful, and it's got a noticeably darker tone than the other ones. The main character, Taran's sidekick, isn't as silly or cute as other Disney animated sidekicks. He's more like Gollum, who's not cute. There's no song and dance numbers. The main villain doesn't crack jokes. He's just a no-nonsense, dark fantasy villain. It's pretty great. You got creepy witches, an army of undead skeletons, an eerie soundtrack, and again, the main villain, the Horned King. This guy scared me as a kid. Obviously, he's an emaciated ghoul with a skeleton face and horns on his head, but the voice acting by John Hurt is also outstanding. He just sounds so evil. If you're looking for a spooky, dark fantasy movie but haven't checked this one out because it's Disney, I don't know, definitely think about giving it another chance. Freaky Stories. This is another Canadian one, so a lot of you probably aren't very familiar with it, but it's an anthology show hosted by a beetle and a maggot who are live action puppets, which I always thought looked really cool. And then we get a few different animated shorts, usually retellings of urban legends or scary campfire type stories. One of the creepiest episodes is a retelling of that famous urban legend about the girl who goes to sleep and her dog licks her hand or her foot or something from underneath the bed. And then one night her hand is being licked like usual, but then she notices her dog isn't under the bed, so who's licking her hand? It's stuff like that. There's also one about this woman who starts using this new hairspray, but then she starts getting these really awful headaches, and in the end a bunch of spiders crawl out of her hair. It's a fun show. Each episode is a bit of a different art style. It's also a new narrator each time, so lots of variety. Dreams in Darkness from Batman the Animated Series. I think Batman the Animated Series is one of the best Batman things to have ever come out. It's certainly one of the greatest kids cartoons ever made. It's got that beautiful Art Deco look, and the use of shadows really gives it some serious noir vibes as well. It just oozes with atmosphere. There are a lot of dark episodes to discuss here, but Dreams in Darkness definitely left quite the impression on a lot of the kids who watched this show. It's a Scarecrow episode, so that alone means you're in for some scares. But I mean, this one starts off with Batman alone in a dingy Arkham Asylum cell strapped up in a straitjacket, so yeah, it's a dark one. Batman had a run-in with Scarecrow and his fear gas and begins recounting how he got into the position he's in. He sees all these crazy dark visions and stuff. And as a kid, Batman was this larger-than-life, indestructible hero who we all looked up to. And even if he did get beaten up or something, he was still in control of his emotions. He never broke his cool. He's Batman. Nothing scares Batman, right? So watching him slowly lose his sanity and succumb to his own fears really throws you off as a kid, because if Batman is scared, then how can my little 6-year-old self not be? Courage the Cowardly Dog. Everyone talks about this cartoon. Courage the Cowardly Dog has a pretty infamous reputation for being this show that scared the crap out of so many children who watched it. I didn't watch this show as as much as one coming up next on the list, but I can definitely see the appeal, and I'm not surprised that it provided kids with so many bad dreams. Aside from all the monsters and creeps who want to do genuine harm to Courage's owners, Eustace and Muriel, I think what made this cartoon really stick with those who grew up with it is that it hit on a very particular level. The whole concept of this show is that Courage is a dog. He's very perceptive and picks up on things that his human owners don't. He sees people for who they really are, and although their dark intentions are very clear to him, he can't actually speak. He's a dog, you know, so he can't tell his owners what's going on. And although the show is about a dog, I think this is how a lot of kids feel sometimes. A lot of the world is very confusing to us as children. We're too young to really understand it, and it can be a bit scary. On top of that, kids don't always have the words to articulate why they're scared, and your parents don't believe you when you say you heard a strange noise or saw a shadow in your closet that just has to be a monster, because how could it not be? You're so frightened. How are they not seeing what I'm seeing? So, you know, it's stuff like that. I think it really hit on that very visceral kind of level. All right, and coming in at number 1 is the Tales from the Cryptkeeper episode, It's For You. I absolutely loved Tales from the Cryptkeeper as a kid. I still do. It was the perfect gateway into the horror genre for me. This is more of a kid-friendly cartoon version of the gory, much more adult Tales from the Crypt that used to air on HBO. There's tons of creepy imagery in this cartoon, lots of fun episodes to talk about, but I want to highlight this episode specifically because I think it really did give me nightmares as a kid. I know for sure it kept me up at night if I was unfortunate enough to think about it. So, in this episode, we meet a kid named Gary who starts making prank calls. One day, he prank calls this old lady saying nothing. He's just breathing heavily into the phone to try and scare her. But things take a creepy turn when the old lady says Gary's name. He's obviously really unsettled by this. How does she know my name? And then over the next few days, Gary keeps getting these phone calls in the middle of the night from the mysterious old lady insisting to talk to him, and no matter where he goes, any phone Gary finds himself near starts to ring with the old lady on the other end of the phone. I won't give away the ending because I actually think this one is worth a watch. Even as an adult, it has a really eerie vibe. Another weird thing about this one is that I saw it when it aired once as a kid. I always wanted to see it again, kept watching reruns, and it just never came back on. And I actually started thinking, like, was that just all in my head? Did I actually see that episode? It wasn't until like years later, when I was in my late teens, it was uploaded to YouTube and I finally watched it again. But anyway, that just added a whole other weird, creepy layer to the whole thing. Anyway, with all that said though, I've been your host, James, and I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.